Chapter 8. Healing into Life and Death by Stephen Levine. Taking heart. In ancient Chinese calligraphy, the symbol for mind and the symbol for heart are the same, Hasin. For when the mind is unclouded, only heart is experienced. Just as when heart is exposed, there are no obstacles in mind. The heart and mind only seem separate to the mind. To the heart, all things are one. Many, as they approach the heart, speak of the release of considerable emotion and feeling, of sadness, anger, grief, fear, and doubt. Some think of these emotions as the qualities of the heart, but actually they are the densities of the mind that form the armoring through which awareness must pass to enter the spaciousness of the heart. This armoring is composed of suppressed emotions, the unfinished business of the mind, the discarded, the undealt with, the unhealed. They are feelings, states of mind, compressed over years of posturing and avoidance. Each emotion, each state of mind, just as it displays a corresponding bodily pattern, also has a concurrent mental script. There are attending thoughts and associated images which express its inner nature. Such thoughts are in words and images, and their form is not difficult to apprehend. But the emotions and feelings which gave them their momentum are less easily noticed upon first arising. Most often we are lost in the thoughts before we can enter into the emotion itself. But in our constant remembering to be present and investigate, we begin to honor our emotions in a whole new way. No longer are they feared or hammered into some fragmented image of our imagined self, but instead they are approached directly, touched, tasted, explored. Emotions are the variously colored lenses through which we perceive thought and reality. For instance, the thought rose, seen through the emotion, the lens of joy is, ah, a rose. It is fragrance, it is color, it is texture. But that same thought rose, seen through the lens of anger is, damn it, a rose. It is thorns, it is threat, it is anger itself. Examining closely the lens, the reality just beyond is no longer distorted. These qualities of mind that many have mistaken for qualities of heart are explored as we pass through our armoring on the way into peace. The heart does not become lost in the separate. It sees anger, but is not angry. It is merciful and forever loving. It is the underlying essence of mind when the separate has fallen away, and only pure awareness, which is pure love, is experienced. It is boundaryless, space beyond definition, one's true nature, the ever uninjured and always whole. Opening the heart to injury or illness means allowing it to be there in love. The usual colored lenses of fear, trepidation, and loathing which distort our reception of illness mindfully noted, met with the light-hearted familiarity of, quote, big surprise, fear again, anger again, end quote. The ancient reactiveness of old mind floating in a new wonderment at the possibility of freedom. One learns in time to focus a heartfelt awareness on the distorting factors. As we develop the qualities of merciful investigation, we experience a healing connectedness with the imbalances of the mind and body. Having opened to sensations as they arise, softening, focusing, exploring, one enters the mind-body in the very instant in which life is received, in, quote, just this much, end quote. not waiting for illness to overwhelm us, for the weight of old identifications to herniate us. We can employ our little pains, our everyday frustrations, our common fears to practice healing. We use the transitory cough, the passing headache, the occasional bruise as a focus of the heart to expand the passageway within. We open to our everyday little deaths to make room for the inevitable approach of our greater deaths. In midlife, opening to the everyday aches and pains of aging does not result in our rising one morning surprised by old age. It allows more and more of our life to be lived in our heart instead of insisted upon in the body. It becomes our most interesting daily occupation. But before we can offer such care to ourselves or anyone else, we must first explore the dictum. Quote, "Physician, heal thyself." End quote. Although we are not healed physicians, it is the path of healing that makes life so rich and allows room for whatever holdings and fears yet remain. The preciousness of the path beneath our feet is so distinct that one hardly wishes to be elsewhere. And even these wishes, which once hardened into our greatest pain and difficulties, are met by a new softness, a willingness to be with what is, an openness to healing. In sending love to ourselves, we send love to all. In sending healing, we are healed. In letting go of that which blocks the heart, the confusions and old incrustations of the mind, we open into the heart of the world. As the sensations and thoughts and feelings that often surround illness become yet more audible, something within begins to melt in mercy for the pain we cause ourselves, in the ways in which we have held so assiduously to our suffering. I apologize. As the armoring melts, we experience our vastness, and the heart expands to fill the whole body with a sense of balance and wellness. At this level of opening, we begin to see the sense in what we had always resisted as, quote, the senselessness of it all, end quote. Then love naturally gravitates towards the area of numbness and deadness in the body, or their equal and opposite, pain and anxiety. The healing is drawn as if by osmosis to the area where it is most needed. In the dynamics of the healer, love moves from an area of greater concentration in one heart to the place of lesser concentration in another. Then it is not healer and healed. There is no separation or sense of duality, but only the sense of oneness present in the manifestations of seemingly differentiation. Letting the heart act as a healer, it receives whole body, whole mind as aspects of itself, just as the sky is inseparable from the clouds which floats through it. The blueness of the sky is never so noticeable as at the edge of a dense cloud. The cost of crossing the river of forgetfulness, moving from the unhealed to the ever-healed is, quote, just this much, end quote. In the worlds of very instant of life unfolding, quote, just this much, end quote, is the millisecond in which the very truth is to be found. It means opening to our whole life. It is the very moment in which existence presents itself and is received. It is in, quote, just this much that our healing accumulates. All the work that is to be done is done in just this much. A fellow who approached us with fourth stage terminal cancer some years ago, after hearing us speak at length about one of our most respected teacher, the venerable Buddhist meditation master Achan Che, resonated very strongly with his teachings of, quote, just this much, end quote. After the lecture, he took me aside to ask more about the Achan Chah's teaching and then said, quote, if life is just this much, then death is just this much too, yes? End quote. His eyes filled with tears as his obviously weakened body shook with deep release. He almost swooned into my arms, saying, quote, I am dying, I need help, end quote. It was the beginning of a long interchange shared through levels and levels of healing. Meeting with Bob the next day, he shared his feelings that death had always seemed so huge as to be unworkable, but that when he had heard the teachings of just this much, he sensed the possibilities inherent in his predicament, the workability of even death. Quote, I have always thought of death as an impenetrable wall, but now I sense that I might be able to relate it brick by brick, end quote. Beginning as always by exploring unfinished business, Bob began to recognize the long-held grief and sadness which had for so long accumulated around his heart and so often blocked entrance into any sense of acceptance or mercy for his predicament. So he began working with the grief meditation, focusing his attention at the center of his chest, using his thumb to press into the grief point there on the sternum, between the nipples, just above the heart, receiving from moment to moment whatever moods, feelings, or thoughts that arose there in the soft awareness. The moment of his resistance to life was never so noticeable as when he opened to his grief, pushing the thumb with gradually increasing pressure into the center of his chest, into that mind-body sensitivity point which has correlations in so many healing systems. He experienced the resistance of a lifetime pushing back, denying entrance past the mind. Knowing there was nowhere to go but in, he began to draw each breath into the aching at the center of his chest. As level after level of holding was released, each previous moment of denial opened to just this much. Rising daily to wash and have a cup of tea, he then retired to his room to sit for nearly an hour, exploring the pain accumulated over a lifetime of disappointment and loss. Over the weeks, as he allowed his feelings to arise and dissolve, he noticed more room in his heart for his sadness, for his pain, for his healing, and discovered that the grief point, when opened, becomes the touch point of the heart. Remembering throughout the day to breathe in and out of the grief point, he continued to expand the passageway into his heart, no longer thinking his life but entering it directly. He discovered that in just this much, nothing was left incomplete or unfinished, discovering the power of forgiveness to soften the hard edges of previous loss. His work with the grief meditation lessened as the forgiveness meditation continued to quiet the mind and open the touch point of his heart. As he let go of the holdings of the past, the grief and old resentments, he noticed a considerable softening in the body. Having cut through the resistance of anger and grief, a soft-bellied acceptance began to let the healing in. His pain diminished as resistance was resolved. His voice softened. Employing the letting go meditation, he entered yet deeper into a sense of heartfulness, directly participating in life, listening so deeply, seeing so mindfully, acting so open-heartedly. Entering the flow, he began deeply to trust the process of which his mind, body were so clearly a part. His healing was unmistakable. About 2 months into our work together, just as he was coming to the place of feeling the extra wellness of being, quote, more alive than ever, His physical condition took a turn for the worst. Awakening one morning to find himself aphasic, his speech scrambled by an unsuspected brain tumor which had spread from the original site of his cancer. He was confused and dismayed, calling daily, explaining in painfully slow communication the feeling that he had somehow, quote, lost it. We reminded him again and again to trust, quote, just this much. It was a difficult time which caused him to return to his original grief meditation, to allow release of some of the disappointment and expectation with which were agitating his mind. Pushing into the grief point, his heart drew There's some flies. His heart drew forgiveness within, and he slowly began to soften into his new condition. Gradually, instead of groaning at a mispronounced or scrambled word, he would often laugh and even use the same word playfully in another sentence, as when he said, quote, I think this tumor and my pain is getting the best of me. Oh no, I don't mean pain, I mean brain, this brain tumor. On the other hand, I have never thought too well with my pain, or brain, whatever it is, end quote. But sometimes it was all a bit too much for him, and he would lame it that he couldn't, quote, get into any of the meditations, end quote. At which time we would remind him to just breathe in and out of his heart. At other times, less overwhelmed by identification with his illness, he worked with the heavy emotional states meditation and was able to focus directly on the disappointment, to explore, quote, just this much at a time, and begin to see beyond depression to spaciousness in which it was floating. It took a lot of long, hard work, but as he came through his weeks of, quote, feeling kind of low, end quote, he displayed a new strength and groundedness. And though the aphasia would now and again present itself each time it arose, he seemed to be able to meet it that much more appreciatively in the heart instead of resistance in the mind. Indeed, when a colleague came to visit and asked him what he was up to nowadays, he answered, quote, just this much. He said his life was too big to encompass, but he had all the room in the world for his living. Continuing to explore the mind, to investigate the nature of perception itself, to examine who it is, indeed, even dies. One moment. To examine who it is, indeed, that even dies. He sometimes, for long periods, went beyond the separate mind of his fears and the separate body of his cancers to the shared heart of healing. He was crossing the river of forgetfulness with a constant remembering and mindfulness. In mid-river, death approached. But all the work of the past months held him in good stead, and trusting so much in the process, he took the leap of faith, which carried him across to the shores of spacious peace. His healing was no less than any of those we had seen who survived in the body. Though his cancer did not desist, his heart became as light as, quote, the feather of truth, end quote. Indeed, the ancient Egyptians believed that after death the heart was placed on the scales of truth to be balanced against a feather, to conclude if the life just passed was in healing or forgetfulness. On the day he died, many had gathered by his bedside to wish him well, and he seemed to have time for everyone, his soft smile greeting each person like a gentle blessing. And when his wife asked what kind of frosting he would like on the cake she was baking, he said, quote, anything will do but no birthday candles. I have no breath left. He died within the hour. His death was, quote, just this much, end quote. As Bob cleared the heart, he recognized the mind as process. His predominant experience in those clearest moments of observing observing the constantly changing nature of each thought and feeling was of its essential impermanence. An opening to the ever-changing flow of impermanence, the imagined solidity of the self-image, which had gone half blind by attempting not to see for so long, was met by a healing mercy and awareness. Seeing this ongoing flow of impermanence, he saw beyond the apparent to directly participate in the unchanging nature of his underlying being. He approached directly the pain we all share and went beyond to the completion we are all capable of. Impermanence was no longer the enemy of his body, the frustrator of desires, but was instead part of a process which bred confidence. Entering each moment completely, the next moment took care of itself. His trust in the process, in the continuum, in life itself, deepening with each healing moment, entering deeply into the process. He saw that too death was impermanent, that life simply was, and continued. There are many means by which we tap to the resources of the heart and enter into the spaciousness of being. But all the work one does to cultivate feelings of loving kindness through exploration and service and meditation is ironically still, quote, what to do until the doctor comes, end quote. Though our underlying nature is pure awareness, pure love, until the heart fully exhibits its true nature, it is skillful to cultivate such feelings as loving kindness in the meantime. Paradoxically, the cultivation of loving kindness through meditation and daily practice is almost like using a water drill in order to hit the water table below, the enormous rivers of compassion and mercy which lie just beneath the surface of our ever-active mind. In an old way, the necessary cultivation of such qualities as loving kindness and sympathetic joy is almost a mimicry of our essential nature. The little love grows greater, the little fears disintegrate. As we enter into the heart of the matter, the mind-body sinks into loving awareness. As the mind sinks into the heart, so the heart is allowed to enter into all matter. As we discover the heart, connected with the disheartened, in this connection of the heart with the uninjured, a new harmonic arises, a deeper sense of being. With this connection, a conduit is established between the heart and the sensations of the body, through which waves and waves of loving kindness may be set into an area of pain or illness. It is in this communion with illness that some have spoken of melting their cancer with love, and others have melted out of their body in profound peace. Having entered directly into the sensation and thoughts and feelings of the mind-body, one may breathe mercy and compassion into illness, just this much through opening to the heart. One may breathe the discomfort of illness into the heart point as a means of purifying and releasing the long-held illness floating in the luminescence of being, breathing love directly into the sensations surrounding illness in the body, drawing loving kindness in with each breath, breathing love directly into dis-ease. By sending love with each breath into the once abandoned area of discomfort, one's whole life heals within them, caressing the area with care and mercy. For forgiveness and love, a powerful purification opens and softens that area. The body floods with warmth and light, sensations arising and dissolving in the boundarylessness awareness. The great peace arises, sitting light as a hummingbird, probing the heart of the newly opened blossom. Then one may experience that there is no longer a need to send love into that area, but that whenever awareness is brought into the space of discomfort, love is received. by focusing on injury or illness with a deeper connectedness to something essential, something very close to unconditional love, is found right there in the center of discomfort. This experience has been likened to finding a luxurious oasis in the midst of a parched and undernourished wasteland. Many have said that their wanderings in the wilderness of mind and body germinated a whole new ecology of life, begun as an impoverished pilgrimage into the unexplored. It quickly became the most fruitful experience of their lives. One patient spoke of this transformative process as a leading from, quote, a great dryness of the heart to a deep moistness of the spirit, end quote. She said it was like watching lifeless sand transformed into the richest loam. Lifeless sand transformed into the richest loam, nurtured with nothing but her love and attention. This healing comes from not, quote, being love, end quote, but from being itself, which is love. It is not a case of, quote, being clear, end quote, but of clear being. This healing is not about being anything but being itself. Nothing separate, no edges, nothing to limit healing. Entering in moments, the realm of pure being. The gateless gate swings open, beyond life and death. Our original face shines back at us. And there's a poem. Please call me by my true names. Do not say that I'll depart